Welcome to the MSP Owner Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Burcham, the CEO of CyTek Corporation, a managed IT services provider based out of Kansas City, Missouri. CyTek has been delivering customized tech support to a diverse range of industries in the area. Chris has been operating CyTek Corporation since December 2023. So we're going to hear the story of this long-tenured company and then also how Chris became the leading man having no prior MSP experience. So, Chris, thanks a lot for joining me on the MSP Owner Podcast. To start off, we would love to get a little bit of background on where you came from and where you grew up.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Yeah.
The kind of quick background on me, I was born and raised here in Kansas City. I started my career out here locally at a large healthcare technology company, which at the time was called Cerner Corporation, and spent about a decade there in a variety of different roles. And I started to get the entrepreneurial itch while I was there, and eventually took the leap and acquired a small manufacturing company here in Kansas City. And I operated that for several years. During that time, we also acquired CyTek through a family investment vehicle. And about a little over a year ago, I was asked to come over and lead CyTek full time. And fortunately, I had scaled the operations at Forte, the manufacturing company, to the point where I didn't need to be there every day to operate it, and was able to do that. And so I've been here at CyTek for over a year. Leading this company, and it's been a wonderful ride.
Cool. So you've got a whole bunch of different things going on. You've worked in corporate, started out your career in corporate, then you transition to entrepreneurship and buying an unrelated manufacturing business, and then you are now running an MSP. So that's like there's a few different stories there that are really interesting to me. And might resonate with some people, because I think some people feel like they go on a same path and they've got to continue going down it. And you feel like you've made some adjustments along the way, and maybe there's some more consistency there than looks at on the surface. But maybe start off, why did you go into corporate? And it sounds like you spent a good chunk at Cerner. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't have a fantastic answer to that, other than I, like a lot of college grads at the time, I was applying anywhere that would give me an interview. And as much as I'd love to tell you that, I was passionate about healthcare and it was what I wanted to do, the truth is it was probably just the best job offer I got at the time. And so I took it, and it ended up being a great thing. It was during a time, I've called it the boom era over there. They were hiring just loads and loads of people. And it was a really fun place to work at the time. I was surrounded by a bunch of peers, people who are still good friends to this day. I met my wife there. While some people would probably say it was very kind of, the stereotype of the culture at the time was that it was very sink or swim. And not everyone liked that, but I think for me, it ended up being a valuable kind of learning ground and training ground. And I mean, there's
by sink or swim, does that mean people were held accountable, or it means people were thrown into things without proper guiding or training?
Kind of the latter. Kind of like, we're going to push you into the deep end, and a lot of you are going to sink, but a few of you aren't. And those are generally the people who stuck around for sustained periods of time. And people might have their, qualms with that approach. I think still to this day, I take aspects of it with me in terms of, being able to drink from a fire hose, being able to learn very quickly about things that I've never heard of before, and being able to action on that. And there are still things, to this day that I'm using that I took from my time.
Are there things from the corporate life that you're trying to unlearn?
Yes. I think that started as soon as I bought Forte, really, right? There were kind of two layers. There were things straight away where I was like, this is a thing that I hate about corporate that I'm going to straight away get rid of because I hate it. And then there were other things that it was almost like I had to unlearn. So specifically, I look back at how I communicated during that time. And just like a lot of people, I was buzzword heavy. I would have told you at that time that I was a great communicator, but I look back on how I communicated during that time, and I actually don't think I was, because I was not nearly as direct as I am now, because I think I learned a lot of fluff. And so I felt like there was a little bit of an unlearning for me, unlearning some of the fluff that goes into our daily communications in a corporate environment, and being able to just get straight to the point and strip everything else away. That was almost something I had to unlearn and relearn, I feel like, along the entrepreneurial journey.
Makes sense. I similarly started out in a larger company environment, and I kind of felt that I didn't spend as much time, but I can see where that might be something you want and need to unlearn if you want to get stuff done. So you spent 8 years at Cerner. Sounds like you start to get the itch for entrepreneurship. How does that start? Is that like there's a defining point where you're like, I need to get out of here? Or is it a gradual burn over time and more of a strategic thought process?
It's definitely something that ramped up over time. I started pretty early on. I started to just get interested in business in general. I was like that guy that was looking at, quarterly earnings reports from Fortune 500 companies. I loved reading and still do, the Kansas City Business Journal, and like learning about local businesses that were successful that I had never heard of. And that whole ecosystem was just really interesting to me. And I was just really fascinated with it. And I was curious, really curious, and still curious to this day about, the people who were doing it, how they had done it, the ones who were successful, why were they successful? That all of that stuff was just like really interesting to me. So that, that burning ember quickly kind of caught fire. And within, it's been a span of a couple of years, I had become pretty dead set on pursuing that path for myself.
So are you looking for businesses while you're working at Cerner?
Yes, I was. I was actively looking both on market, off market. I was in touch with brokers, spent a lot of time just getting familiar with the scene, the scene, what that looked like, how it all worked, all the intricacies, which, I'm sure Ben, that go into, making an offer, structuring a deal, financing. That, of course, is a big piece of it. Figuring out what I could do, what I couldn't do. All of that stuff. So I was actively kind of keeping an ear to the ground my last couple of years there, and eventually found Forte and took the leap off the cliff.
So transition from services and software to manufacturing and selling product. What is that like?
Yeah. So I had, of course, spent, my whole career in basically a services business. And I was intrigued by the idea of the scalability of a product business. And to this day, I still feel that there's something inherently beautiful about, machine makes part, we ship part. It in its purest form is just like a beautifully simple deal, especially if you are coming from a services business. Of course, that's an oversimplification. There's a lot more that goes into it. There are challenges every day, just like there are in any other business. But I hadn't narrowed a search to only manufacturing. So it was kind of a marriage of within the realm of, industries that I was loosely looking at, but also just opportunity that presented itself. And that all kind of just came together at the right time.
Was there something special about Forte when you saw it, or was it kind of just met your requirements?
There were a couple things. it was a really healthy, functioning business. But if you walked in there at the time, it looked like it was a mess. It was like, looked like nobody had been in there in 20 years. So I was intrigued by the thought that if we could, bring some things into the 21st century a little bit, that there was a ton of potential there. And the other thing that was really kind of an eyebrow raiser is, we do custom work. Forte, we have our own line of parts, which is pretty unusual for a small manufacturer. So there's a lot of advantages that come with that. And that was another thing that was very intriguing to me. There's a lot of custom shops out there, right? But that's what they are, is custom shops. And we do that work. But the fact that they had their own line of products was a pretty eyebrow-raising differentiator for a small manufacturer. And so that was another thing that made me kind of go, all right, I want to kind of take the lead with this.
Nice. And so size-wise, what was the revenue and employee count when you acquired that business?
Small. They were doing about $1 million a year when I bought them, and they had 3 employees. One was actually on work comp leave at the time, so we were really functioning with 2 employees.
Wow.
So it was small. You absolutely had to kind of roll your sleeves up and get dirty there, especially at the beginning. And it was especially those early days. It was a challenge, right? But we emerged from it. We were able to, we have been able to grow revenue, get a great team in place as well, which is, as I'm sure you know, been as important as anything. And once we did that, it was kind of off to the races.
Hi, I'm Ben Tigelaar, the host of MSP Owner Podcast and the CEO of DataTel, an IT managed service provider with 35 employees. The mission of this podcast is simple: to have authentic conversations with IT owners about their journey, how it started, the challenges they've faced, and where they're going next. Every episode, I personally walk away with a new actionable item to strengthen my own business. But a quick word about my company, DataTel. We are actively acquiring MSPs who align with our service and culture. So if your company is generating between $1 and $10 million of revenue, I want to talk to you. But wait, you're probably thinking, why me and why DataTel? First is, I get you. I understand the challenges MSP owners face, being one myself, feeling overworked, overwhelmed, constantly being on call, struggling to bring in new business. I have the solutions and people in place to address these pain points. Second is culture. We run our business on EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which has been transformative for our employees and clients alike. I believe that building a great company comes down to finding and retaining great people who are in the right seats. Everything else is noise. If any of this resonates, it probably means we're a fit and we should be having a conversation. Until then, let's get back to the show. Man, the transition from, I guess, corporate and structured to a small business is like incredibly stark. And then when you go into a business that has 3 or 4 employees, that must have been pretty different than working at Cerner, right? Like, I think back to a story about when I acquired my first small business, healthcare company. The first week, I had 2 employees come into my office and basically unload their problems on me. And both ended up crying, one for personal reasons, one for work reasons. And I was like, oh my, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
Did you have a similar moment like that when you were like, what am I doing here?
Sure. Yeah. I think I absolutely did. And I'd venture to guess most people who have undertaken that journey have also had that moment, right? Where they're like, oh God, what have I done? I mean, in my case there, the 2 employees we had at the time actually both quit within the first 6 months that I was there, which was at the time very stressful, and was probably that moment where I'm going, oh my God, what have I gotten myself? What have I done? But it's the funny part is looking back now, I can't imagine us being where we are now if those guys were still there. You know what I'm saying? They were actually holding us back much more than they were propelling us forward.
But you're 6 months in and you have no idea what you're doing.
Right. So that was a problem. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when you look back on it, now you can look at it, but when you were in the moment, what did you feel like when that was happening?
Oh, I mean, it's max stress, right? It's feelings of doubt, all the things that I think a lot of, business owners or business leaders wrestle with. I had people warn me about that before I bought the business, right? I had people tell you, hey, you've got some key man risk here. And I was like, I know that I'm going to accept that risk. And it blew up in my face basically in the first 6 months I was there. So it was, there was a stressful time there. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. I absolutely had those thoughts of like, unbelievable. I launched into this venture down this path and I'm going to fail in the first year. Like, what am I doing? All of those thoughts. But that's not what happened. We got it together. I, had a little bit of good fortune in making some good hires, which I don't know about you, Ben. I still feel like to this day, no matter how good your interview process is, if you really hit a home run, some of it's good fortune. And there was a byproduct of that time period too, where even though those guys at the time were the guys who kind of knew how to do everything, when they left and we kind of got a new team in there, the culture improved dramatically and everyone was rowing in the same direction all of a sudden. And I hadn't even realized how much that was affecting not just me, but the entire business until we were able to kind of wipe that slate clean, get a new group in there who, again, was bought in and not fighting me every step of the way. And so that was absolutely a challenging time, but I really do value the experience and the lessons I learned during that time. I think I've said this before, like, my first year there was the best MBA you could ever get. And it all, fortunately, it all worked out. So
what did your support network look like?
In terms of like,
who did you go to when stuff was going down and who did you talk to?
I really two people. One, and I was very fortunate in this regard. One of them was the prior owner of the business. So I had and still have a great relationship with the seller of that business, which sometimes happens, but I don't think always happens. So I was very fortunate. I could pick up the phone anytime. And then, the other person that I'm so fortunate to be able to call and pick up, who has decades and decades of experience, is my dad, who was, a lifelong banker here in Kansas City. Had a lot of success doing that. Same deal, small, but anything I've seen or here at CyTek, he's also seen. Right. So I was fortunate, and I think it's really important for any small business owner, leader to have those people that you can call and talk to about that stuff. Right. Because if you can't, it can be a very lonely journey.
100%. And you haven't done were you involved in any peer groups at that time or?
So I wasn't, I was not, and if I were doing it all over again, I would have jumped into peer groups a lot sooner. I think at the time it was one of those deals where it felt like I was doing everything I could possibly do just to, keep my head above water. And then the idea of going out and trying to find peer groups felt like another thing, but I'm a big believer in peer groups. Like I think being able to talk with, whether it's industry specific or whether it's not industry specific, and it's just, other, young small business owners. I found that stuff so helpful in so many different ways. So I wasn't doing it at that time, but if I were, going back and talking to myself now, I would say, go get in a peer group, So you grow and do stuff with Forte. Where did you take the business from when you bought it to when you decided, hey, I'm going to go do another business? We hit, So we were doing about $1 million a year when I bought it. We hit 1.5 pretty quickly within a couple of years. We were about, I want to say we're between maybe 3 and 4 years in, when the idea of coming over to run CyTek was broached to me, and there was a company that we had bought, kind of like I mentioned, through a family investment vehicle. So I was just so confident in the team that we had over there, that I tend to be an eternal optimist, but I really felt like it could be like a best of both worlds deal. And so, I was intrigued. I had at Forte, I had cross paths with, cybersecurity and managed services and that piece of it. The opportunity that I saw, given that it's essentially a local, at least right now, a local metro area business, I knew that one of the challenges that we had at 14, a lot of our customers were huge, like huge OEMs. And I was like, man, I feel like I know, 10 people right now that I could go and get to sign up for just through existing relationships. Right. So I was kind of like, I feel like there's a big opportunity there. There were, they were going through kind of a transition period at the time. And so, in my, million miles an hour brain, I'm going, okay, I think we can keep the momentum we've got over here. And I really feel like there's a bunch of great opportunity over here too. And, crazy me goes, let's do both.
Nice. With CyTek, you said you acquired it with a family investment vehicle. Can you talk about that? What does that mean?
Yeah. So we've had a family investment vehicle for, several years, and have done, not a huge amount, but some different dealings through that. We're always kind of keeping an eye out. I obviously had at least one experience with one acquisition. My dad had a bunch of experience on the financing side, on the banking too. And actually, he had worked in a prior life. He was actually a client of CyTek's for a long time. So we increasingly got intrigued by the idea of specifically the cybersecurity piece. It just anecdotally seemed like you were seeing that everywhere. It was getting talked about more and more. And at that time, I didn't know a ton. I just knew that it seemed to be everywhere, basically, was what I knew at that time. We knew at the time, the owners, the previous owners, ultimately the previous owner, or the main shareholder at the time was, he'd done it for 20 years, done a great job with it, was just approaching retirement age. And we kind of had the informal conversation of, have you thought about what you're going to do? We're interested in getting into this space. Kind of a somewhat long story short, ultimately made an offer to buy the business, and we're able to do that. And we actually hired someone to run it at the time, and he did for several years. And that's kind of the condensed version of how we got into the MSP space.
So immediate family business funded, yes. And then you acquired it, and then someone else ran it for a few years as like a hired gun CEO, right? Did that person come with the business, or were they brand new?
No, they were outside. A friend of mine, actually, from my time at Cerner.
Oh, cool.
So he did that for a couple of years. he ended up leaving and going elsewhere. And then that was when I came in, kind of December 23.
So with CyTek, so it sounds like CyTek, at least from a revenue perspective, you're doing roughly $6 million of revenue right now.
Yeah.
You've got about 20-ish employees, you said?
Yeah, about 20. I think we're 20.
So can you walk through the structure of the company as it sits today, people wise? I'm curious what your org chart looks like.
Yeah. So our org chart. So there's myself. We have we keep adding initials to her title: CFOO, Chief Finance and Operations Officer. We hired this year. Not this year, it's 25. Last year, 2024, we hired a director of service delivery who's over all of our technical operations. We have 4 network engineers and field techs who are going on site. We have a help desk staff of 3. We have a full-time cybersecurity analyst. We have 2 VCIOs, another account manager. We have an operations analyst who assists with a bunch of different stuff, everything from procurement to some sales support stuff, getting proposals together, that type of thing. See, who am I missing?
And who's doing sales? Is the VCIO or the account managers doing sales?
They're doing some of it. I do a lot of it. That's actually a topic that's been a point of discussion a lot recently, is kind of steering our sales efforts. What do we want that to look like in 25? How do we want to define the difference? I'd be really interested to hear your take on this, Ben, but like, how do we define the difference between VCIO work and pure hunter sales exec type of roles? So I do a lot of it myself. Actually, I like doing it. But I also have recognized that in order to scale, we're going to need a little bit more of that. So long-winded to answer your question, our VCIOs certainly do a lot of that, especially the cross-selling and upselling into their base. They're handling a lot of that. And then I'm still very involved in it as well.
Do your VCIOs have a pretty technical background, or they come from more business?
One of them was a senior network engineer and has been with the company for over 20 years. But had everything that like I was looking for in terms of, I always say like the best engineers are the ones who you talk to them and you don't think they're engineers, right? Presented well, really well spoken, great emotional intelligence. Clients loved him, all of those things. So he does have a technical background. Our other one was actually a recent hire from a competitor, actually. And he has a little bit of a technical background, but most of his background is VCIO, account management, that type of work.
Got it. Yeah. It ends up being a little bit messy between account management, sales, VCIO, how you end up structuring that. And I think it's different for every company, right? You've got kind of a mix of the two. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of founder-led sales. So like you're driving a lot of the sales process and you don't really have a pure hunter on the books. Is that correct?
That's true. And we, like I said, that's been like a very recent topic of conversation for us. And we're actually, we have been talking to a hunter, and we also have invested more in marketing. And that's something that the company never historically did, right? If there was a sale, it was a referral.
It was all relationship-driven referral business.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, it is a lot of founder-led sales, outreach, outbound, whatever you want to call it. And then, we've had to have a lot of conversations about like what exactly do we want the VC? Do we want VCIOs? How do we want that to look in terms of we had arguments on different ends of the scale, ranging from I think it's a real value add or a trust builder to be able to say that we're not sales and we're just, client partner only. And that helps to know we need you guys to be driving some revenue. So we've had all those conversations recently, right? Because in a way it's kind of a new thing for the company, so I like where we've settled with it. I don't think we've 100% figured it out like permanently for where we're going to land on that, but it's definitely been a big topic of conversation for us recently.
With businesses that have primarily generated their new business from referrals and just existing business is great because they have legit operations and they're serving their clients well, but they have sounds like very little infrastructure on the sales side and basically nothing on the marketing side.
Yep.
That is very common.
And we made, like I said, we had made the moves. I felt we really fortified our technical infrastructure, and which I felt like we needed to do. I've seen that movie before where people load up on the sales infrastructure and then can't execute on anything and can't keep anyone around. I didn't want to do that. So we made those investments, in our technical infrastructure, the management of that infrastructure. And I love where we're positioned now to that end. So now it's more about how do we want to go about putting our foot on the gas from a sales standpoint to, load up that technical infrastructure, basically.
Are you focusing in any particular vertical or are you Kansas City based?
95% of our clients are metro area, Kansas City. That said, we have clients in Texas, we have clients in New York, we have clients in Michigan, Arizona. So we do have some national accounts, but vast majority of it is just metro area. And I still feel like there's plenty of meat on that bone here locally, especially with some of the industry forces at work with regards to I'm sure you see this too, huge roll-ups. We've seen, even just since I've been here, one of our main competitors got rolled up. And I don't know what you've seen, but at a certain size level, it's really hard for them to keep up a certain level of service if they're a $70 million company. So,
so you're seeing other MSPs in your market get gobbled up and provide worse quality service to their clients.
At least that seems to be what I've seen so far.
Is that the reason, if you think back to your last 10 prospect calls, what was the main driving pain point that you identified?
Yeah, if I were to say the last 10, I bet you maybe half of those, 5 of those, you could trace back to, hey, our MSP, we loved our MSP, but they got acquired. And, now service, we're noticing bad changes, basically. And so we've been with them forever, but this has made us think, hey, maybe we want to at least see what else is out there. Everything from that to we're done with them. We want to get proposals from you guys and a few others and see. So
what are the things that are happening? It's basically response time, or did you dig into further? What do those mean? What are the frustrations coming from?
That's actually a good question, because I actually did want to know specifically, because response time is one thing, right? But if they're going and saying, well, they jacked up our prices or they restructured they made us restructure our agreements. I wanted to look at what, or at least to the extent they would let us, because I'm going, okay, if they don't like this new agreement, that might look exactly like what we're about to put in front of them. And that might mean they're not ready to be a good client for us, So I did want to know specifically, is it a service thing? Is it a response time? In a lot of most cases, I would say it was a gradual degradation of service. It wasn't overnight. It was they used to get back to us in 30 minutes and now it's several hours, and, they don't follow up and things fall through the cracks. We have to, remind them about X and Y. And this issue over here, we've been talking with them about it for a year. It's never really gotten fixed. A lot of that type of stuff.
Yeah. So it sounds like most of the prospects are coming from other MSPs. How many of the last 10, which ones are what percentage would you say have never used an MSP before?
I would say certainly that's part of it. And then the other half, I guess, would be just, us trying to leverage, I do feel like we just have really good local relationships and just trying to see, kind of pushing that boulder up the hill to see if we can get a foot in the door somewhere that we'd want to. We're not, and as you know, that can be a long sales cycle, right? Especially if they're not feeling any particular pain. But yeah, that, and then I think, other MSPs are part of it for sure.
Differentiation. How do you differentiate in the sales process when you know a client is shopping around and has multiple other MSPs that they're considering?
So Ben, I listened to your last podcast. I don't know if that was your first, and I loved the conversation you guys had about this, because this has also been just like kind of a kryptonite for us, right? And I think all of us are trying to figure that out, right? How do we, coming out and saying, hey, we offer VCIO services, we are a proactive service provider, this and that. We've kind of had to come to grips with, actually that's not special. That's just what you need to do to compete now. Right. So one of the areas, there's really kind of two areas that we've looked at in an effort to try and set ourselves apart. One of them, I think, actually came up on your last podcast, and that was diving deeper into service level applications. CyTek was actually founded on that. So we were the previous owner was a subject matter expert in a legal software called World Docs.
Sounds old. Sounds very old.
Well, it completely obsoleted this year. So, but the business actually built outward from that, and that was a huge value add for law firms, right? Because I'm sure you've seen, software is what people are in day to day. They're not in their network infrastructure day to day, right? So if you're adding value through, line of service business applications, that was a huge differentiator. Now the challenge with that, obviously, is that that's just one industry, and there's business to be had, certainly still in Kansas City in that space. But if you pursue that really hard, you're closing yourself off to all these other industries. The other area where we feel like there's opportunity to differentiate is in compliance. So increasingly we get asked, I'm sure you guys do too, especially if you're in the, financial services is a big area where this happens. Anybody who's got any of our clients, anybody's got like covered government contracts, DoD, that type of thing. We've had a lot of conversations about how can we leverage compliance to be a differentiator? Because the way I see it is like, okay, if I'm the president of one of our clients or the administrator of one of our clients, what's bringing more value to me? Is it, okay, the network's up and going, I expect that, right? But man, compliance is a huge thing on my plate. If CyTek can come in and take that off my plate, amazing. That's a huge help, right? So that's one of the areas, and again, that's been a big topic of recent conversation, ongoing, is the differentiation piece. But compliance is an area where we're really trying to kind of dig in and see where we can add value on that front, whether that's a lot of the SEC regulations for financial firms are increasingly technology based. There's different certifications, SOC 2, that type of thing that help with that. But that's an area we think maybe could be a differentiator for us.
What does that ultimately look like? Does that look like a service set that's provided that you can communicate what the value is? Because, if you don't, then it feels like mushy, right? Like, yeah. So how do you end up taking that concept into something that is a a product or a service, something that's repeatable and you can communicate its value? Like, how would you do that from where you're at today?
I think you have to package it, and this is one of the things that we've been wrestling with. That's a really broad thing, right? Like just say compliance. Every industry has different compliance. There's like a bajillion certifications. So I think the way that, at least preliminarily, we've thought about it is, what's the biggest opportunity for us there? Right now, we probably feel like it's in financial services. And then what does that package look like? And we probably start there, right? And say, hey, in addition, we have, this package that, certifies you'll be compliant with, FINRA, blah, blah, blah. And then there are partners as well, Drata, Vanta, a few others who have the ability to take some of that data and make it digestible as well for us and for our clients. So I think and we haven't completely solved this or fleshed out how we want it to look, but I think it's picking one spot because you can't do them all, right? And then figuring out, what does that package look like? And also there's a question of liability, right? Like, are we essentially, if we offer this, are we essentially accepting liability for their compliance? Or are we just saying, we're going to help you, it's still your responsibility to be compliant, but this will help you do that. So these are all things we're talking about right now.
Do you want to accept liability for that?
Ideally, no. Right. And I think it goes to the point of setting clear expectations, right? Up front. What you wouldn't want to do is not address that. Get somebody started on that. Something happens a year down the road, and they go, "Well, I thought and now it's a fight." Right.
Yeah, compliance as a service feels like a growing area within the MSP space. You see it a lot with a variety of different clients. They've got a bunch of compliance stuff on their plate, or when they get to a point in their business when they figure out that, compliance might be important after they, see how poorly things are being run, and now they need to make an investment. So feels like a good opportunity to connect the IT plus the compliance and provide value. I've seen it be most successful in like end industries where they're specific, like a manufacturing or a legal or whatever. I haven't seen it as much on the generalist side. So I'm curious to see how you develop that, at least on the local perspective, or if you end up focusing on a particular end industry.
Are you guys into any of that at all? Like, are you doing any compliance as a service stuff?
Yeah, but it's light, and it's not as industry specific as what you what it could be, right?
Sure.
So that's where I think when I've talked about what is our focus and what is our niche, we want to develop more capability within certain end industries so we can provide something like that to, say, food manufacturing, right? Yep. Because it's very specific compliance needs as it relates to what they need to do and how they need to do it. So that feels like the highest value, at least end industry. But if you think about it more on a local, I think that's more of a challenge because you just don't know what people care about. And there's a laundry list of things, right? Is it HIPAA compliance for a healthcare company, or is it PCI compliance? Right. I think it really depends.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the hard part, right? Where are we going to put our resources and our time so that, we get to go where we want to go?
Totally.
So your business is at roughly $6 million of revenue. Do you guys have a plan for where you want to be in like 3 to 5 years? What does the company look like? How big is it? How many employees?
Yeah. So our banner goal that we've kind of always hung up is how do we become a $10 million company? And then longer term, 10 to 15 years, how do we become a $40 million company? The good, as I have told our team, the good news is, and the company was doing a little under 3 million when we bought it. So, we have just about doubled it in 3 years. And the good news is I feel like there's still a lot of meat on the bone in terms of we've done all that basically without any marketing, without any, true sales hunting, if you will. And so I feel like there's still plenty of organic growth left on the bone, but I also feel like, for us to get there, being acquisitive is going to have to be part of the equation starting this year. So, we've set a target. We'd like to get one acquisition done this year.
And that would be local to Kansas City, or are you open to other regions?
We're targeting Kansas City for now. I think certainly down the road, we're absolutely open to other regions, but we'd like it to be local, especially for the first one. And I think what's nice is, I'd be curious to hear your experience on this too, is like, I feel like even now, just a little over a year into it, I have a much better idea of what a good acquisition would look like versus just any acquisition, right? In terms of making sure like we know what a good client base looks like versus not such a good client base. We know what a service department that has its act together versus one that's kind of all over the place looks like. And we know what we would want those pieces to, we know what good agreements look like versus bad ones or ones that don't even exist look like.
You have a position now because you understand the business. Right. What is the difference between, can you go into the first one that you talked about, good versus bad client base? Yeah. What does that mean to you and your business as it relates to who you would potentially acquire?
So one is simply, size and budget, right? There's a lot, in our area, there's a lot of like 1-2 man shops running around taking care of 4 and 5 seat companies. And that's great, but that's not really what we're interested in doing, right? We typically want to see at least 10, preferably closer to 15 seats. And then within that, are they, what are they doing for, what does their agreement look like? Is it old school break fix? We're not really interested in trying to go around to all those people and convert them, right? What is their stance on cybersecurity? Do they understand it's a necessary investment, or have they been resisting it for 20 years? What is those types of metrics? So, there's a huge difference between the one, and I've met both of them. I met both scenarios. The 1 to 3 man shop who's just kind of a break fix, rolling around in his car. It's a great job for him versus, I've met owners of 3 and 4 person MSPs who have, really great managed service agreements with all their clients who are ACHing monthly. They have a proper security stack. They're, 20 to 70, 70 seat clients. So I guess kind of long-winded to answer your question, Ben, but that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying like examining, what does their client base look like?
And do you differentiate on like dollar per seat either? Like if someone's charging $60 a seat or $225 a seat, what do you think when you see those differences?
Yeah, that's a good point too. I think the first thing I would look for is just like, are they charging dollar per seat, period? If they are, unless it's just something outrageously low, I feel like we can get those people to where we know that we need them to be. If they're not, and it's just like a time and materials break fix deal, it's been my experience that it's just a really uphill battle to get, especially if that's all they've ever known, to get them aligned to what we would want it to look like. So I would be definitely want to know what they are doing per seat, but I think generally I would feel if they're on a per seat model, I'm not super concerned about aligning it to our per seat model. I would be more concerned if they weren't on a per seat model at all.
Got it. The dollar per seat feels like it does indicate to me the investment in the team and the services provided as well. Because when I look at something that's like $75 a seat, I know what their stack is going to look like. I know what their service quality is going to look like versus my $175 a seat. And I'm like, I don't know if those are the right clients for our model, because my business, we sit more on the, medium high to high end. And when I look at these kind of low cost competitors, low quality service, those clients, if they like that model, I don't know how I'm going to get them to go 2x what they're currently doing without massive attrition. So that's kind of where I've run into it. And I try to make sure that gap is as, smaller is better, in my opinion.
Totally. I mean, and we spent a huge chunk of this year kind of on the same topic. We just called it, aligning and elevating our client base, and sometimes that meant making some tough decisions around clients that had been with us for a long time.
So you functionally fired some clients as a result of transition of your internal model?
Essentially, yes. But I will say, so what we did, we did a comprehensive review of our entire client base. We standardized our offering this year, so you either get gold, silver, or bronze. Like we had a lot of people with a lot of different stacks and combos. I thought it was really important to standardize that if we were going to have any success scaling. So we did that, and then we also had kind of this. I would imagine other MSPs have this too. Like, we call them legacy clients. That had either refused to get on board with our new offerings. And we didn't call and say we're not doing business with you anymore, but we did kind of adjust our pricing to where it was either going to be worth it for us to do that, or they were going to kind of get it and they were going to get on board. And I was actually surprised at the amount of them that said, okay, well, I honestly thought more were going to leave than did. And actually more were like, okay, well, sign up for managed services and your silver tier security and all this stuff. And, but I thought that was important to do, both from a positioning of CyTek, like our own brand, right? We didn't want to be a low cost provider. And also just fiscally for the business, I felt like it was the right thing to do.
I'm actually blown away that at your size, you haven't standardized, or you weren't able to standardize, because like usually that means you have a lot more operational constraints and issues, but you don't have like the crazy amount of operational employees. So how does that work? I'm like scratching my head like, wow, like how did you do that?
Well, the first couple months of the year, we defined what those were, right? What does that look like? We identified I think it was between 20 and 25% of the clients that we wanted to target with that. So we had most of our client base, great clients, been with us a long time, and they value what we do. It's a great relationship. So I didn't want to start there. I wanted to start with the ones that I didn't feel like we either straight up weren't making any money on, or B, just had no prospects to grow with. And so we did that. And then we just systematically went to everyone and said, hey, this is how our offerings are packaged now. If we're going to continue to support you, it's going to be, it's going to be A, B, and C. And we just kind of ripped the Band-Aid off. And it was kind of, in a way, it helped that I was new at the time, because I didn't mind being the bad guy, honestly. Like, oh, hey, this new management, they're big business, they're blah, blah, blah. But we just did the work. Like, we just went around to all of them, said, this is the deal now, and none of them were like, none of them were super happy about it. But again, I was surprised at the amount of them that said.
Do you have a sense for what I'm very, very curious about when you do transitions like this, what did you think the result was going to be when you like planned this all out and you came up with a plan? And then what did the actual results look like in terms of, okay, you were 70% successful and you had 30% attrition? Like, do you have those numbers?
I was expecting we do. I was expecting somewhere between, so of that bottom 20%, I was expecting somewhere between 30 and 50% attrition. Like I thought that number would just be like, either we can't do it or that's outrageous. We're not going to do it. I think the total number of those clients ended up being, I believe, it was either 47 or 48. Only 3 of them left.
3 clients, 3%. Oh,
three of that 48. So it would be
got it.
6 or 7%, I guess, somewhere in there.
Wow.
And honestly, like I said, I was expecting way more, and I was surprised by the number that kind of got on board when presented with this, if you want to call it an ultimatum, of saying.
Does that cut against the argument though that you made earlier about break fix not transitioning? Because if you had 6% attrition, or is that more the stickiness of the relationship and the stuff within the business and the pain of moving? It's doesn't it cut against that argument that well, shouldn't you buy break fix if you can really convert it 94%?
I see what you're saying. I think the difference, at least the way I think about it, is we did in just about every case have long-standing and good relationships with those people. Would it have been different if we were buying that company and they didn't know us from Adam?
Yeah.
I feel like probably, right? I believe, I don't have, data on this, but I believe what happened in a lot of cases was they went out, they'd been with us for 20 years. We brought this to them. They go, F no, we're not doing that. Then they went out and got other proposals and realized, oh, this is the way of the world now. I guess if we're going to do this, I'd rather do it with CyTek, who we've been with for 20 years,
I see.
And it was really cool. I mean, in a lot of cases, honestly, or at least several cases, I feel like it really actually rejuvenated the relationship. It kind of renewed it. It allowed us to introduce the idea that, hey, we'd like to be your technology, with this, we'd like to be we talk about positioning ourselves as your technology partner, not just the guy that fixes the computer. And in a lot of cases, we did have kind of rejuvenated relationships with a lot of these longtime clients where it ultimately came out for the better, not just for us, but also for them.
Wow.
It ruffled some feathers when I said this, this is what we're going to do, but I'm very glad that we did it. And I think the larger point is I think it's really important for us to be able to scale successfully.
So you've got some growth ambitions. You're going to start to really develop the sales function. You're going to be investing in marketing, I assume, and you're looking to acquire others within the Kansas City metro area. How do you plan? I assume that there's not that many prospects within Kansas City. I mean, how many MSPs that fit your criteria exist within the Kansas City market?
There's probably 15 to 25 ultimately that would fit our criteria. Most of those there's really, I don't know about you guys. I feel like there's, especially with the rolling up that's happening, that there's essentially 3 tiers of MSP in Kansas City. There's the rolled up guys who are huge now. There's the middle-sized guys, us and a couple others, a couple competitors. And then there's, kind of the littler guy, the 1.5 million or below folks, the kind of 1, 2, 3, 4-man shops. We're certainly not closed off to the idea of acquiring one of our, mid-tier direct competitors, but I think probably, at least for the first one, the ideal one would probably be a really healthy and well-run one of those kind of smaller run companies.
Interesting. I would have picked the mid-tier ones.
Really?
Immediately. Just because of the size and the scale and the capability. But I guess the cost and price of a smaller company is going to be less, and you'll be able to, the integration issues are probably less as well.
So I was going to say, part of my thought process on that I'd be curious because I know you've done it. Is especially for we've never acquired a company, so I'm sensitive to the integration aspects of it. And part of my thought process is obviously it would be easier to integrate a smaller company than to try and immediately go to a competitor and integrate 25 people instead of 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of cuts back to that timeless argument about should you buy a small business or a large business,
Right?
And my personal preference is always buy the biggest business possible because it has scale, it has systems, processes, larger client base. It's got all the things, and yeah, it's a little bit more of a heavy lift on the integration, but there's actually people there to do it. On the small side, you acquire it, they're all doing the things.
Right.
And so I think all else equal, the larger ones, I think they work. I don't think they're any quote more work. There's actually more people and resources available to execute on the things, and they might bring additional value that the smaller guys might not really have, where I see acquisitions as like the opportunity to up-level your client base and up-level your people and service capability. So if bigger companies obviously have more talent, and there's going to be, if there's a 10 to 15 employee company, there's going to be 1, 2, 3 employees who are, the absolute game changers, right? They're contributing most of the value of the company. So you just have more opportunity to get more of those, is my view.
Makes sense.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you jumping on. I love your background, transitioning from corporate to owning a manufacturing company to jumping into managed services. And you're still fresh, but you clearly understand the market. And frankly, I think it's an advantage over people in the industry, just because we come from different backgrounds and we're able to run and jump in ways that they aren't able to. So I'm excited to see where you're going to take this business. I'll put money on you're going to be over 10 million in 3 years.
I appreciate it. I've said this a long time, but when I came to CyTek, I felt like my biggest weakness was also my biggest strength, being that I didn't come from the industry. I've always said that I feel like with myself and also anybody that we hire, that the best eyes are usually the freshest eyes. And I didn't know, I didn't have experience in the industry, but also I had no preconceived notions about how things were supposed to look. And sometimes people who have, I think this is true of any company that have been there a long time. It's very easy. And I think it's human nature to become house blind to certain things. And the fresh eyes are usually the ones that come in and go, why is that low hanging fruit over there and nobody's done anything with it? Right. Or, hey, there's this huge opportunity and we in the mix of all these other things that are going on, we just haven't done anything. Well, it's helpful to have, again, some fresh eyes go, hey, we should prioritize that because that is really good. I know there's 1,000 things going on, but what about this thing right here? So I felt like to date, it's been, my biggest weakness and my biggest strength, not having the preconceived notions about how any of it's supposed to work, really.
You've given hope to naive people everywhere. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Thanks, Ben.